James, you're on mute. I don't know.
Yeah, we can't hear you if you're talking.
Yes, I was talking. Okay. All right. So let's look at like just a demo. One of these menus that I've been talking about, like an API. Now we're not going to use this. Let's just practice reading this. So when I was like had that drawing and I tell you like you get you know this is like our menu, the things we can order at our restaurant, and the restaurant is just in a sense the server, it's the back end. So here's what they provide, and they're using the HTTP URL like kind of protocol. So it looks like they have like a pet model, maybe a store model, a user model. I could maybe come look at like what a pet model looks like. It looks like a pet has an ID, it has a name, it has photo URLs. That looks like it's kind of like an array. It has some tags. Like a user, looks like a user has an ID, username, first name, last name, email, password, phone, user status. And there's the types of that data. Your tag has an ID and it has a name. So that's kind of describing me what these models look like what attributes do they have and what type of data are they. So now I kind of know what like a user is. I know what like a pet is. So if I do like a post request to pet, like I need like to/pet, and then I give it the ID of the pet, call it pet ID, and this upload image, this is going to upload an image. So we won't get into like the bonus things we can go into, but here's like if I give them a successful pet upload image, they're going to give me back like this 200 status with like the code, the type, and the message. Now we're not going to get so like with our menus, they're not going to be this detailed. But if I do a post/pet, that's going to add a new pet to the store. And this is something like when I send my data, they kind of probably want me to send something that looks like this. Cool. But can you kind of see like just at a high level, like this menu? Like we didn't write this backend, like we don't know what language it's written in, but you can kind of start to read how to use it, right? Maybe the specifics of like how to send data are a little blurry, but this is like how simple the HTTP protocol is. It's like you do a request in a URL, like a get to/pet pet ID. That should return one pet, right? A delete/pet pet ID, that deletes a pet. I do a post to store/order, probably give it some order information. That's going to create an order. I do a get user and then the username, that's going to get user by username. Cool. Does that make sense? Or is that somewhat readable to you?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, it makes
it's readable.
sense, but we'll just have to put more time in it. But yeah, it looks readable.
So let's do this. So I'm going to just, we're going to do this with we're going to create a food model, and we're going to create the menu to handle the CRUD actions on that food model. Okay. So we created a Rails app so I ran this command Rails new food demo, and now we're in this Rails app. So I can open this up into code. It's not the right one, it's right here. Sweet. So the first thing I could do is I could create my model. So remember, the model is going to be the thing that knows how to interact with the database. It's also where we're going to put like business logic. It's where we can do validations for like before we update something or create something, we can check, hey, is this a valid food? But we'll just create this model, and it's really simple with the Rails. You can use the Rails command line tool. Do a Rails G model. So Rails generate model, and then I give it the name of the model. So we want to create a food. And then I give it the attributes. So a food has a name. That is going to be the type, data type string, and it has a price. And that's going to be a float. So in our MVC, I just created like that food model. So something I need to do as well is I haven't created my database once, so I need to create my database. And then whenever I create a model, I need to run this command. I need to do what's called a migration. I'm not going to get into why this is important or why we have to do it, but just note when I create the model, it gives me the instruction to create the table in the database. I can show you right here. Here's the migration. This is the instruction to actually create a table, the food table, and destroy it. But if I go to my database, and I don't have like this schema.rb file, so I don't actually have anything in my database right now, any tables. What I need to do is run this command, railsdb migrate. After I run that command, now I do have this schema.rb. Now I do have a foods table in my database.
What does a table do?
So that's kind of like a database lingo. So in databases, you're going to create tables to represent your objects. So I have a foods table now in my database. And you can think of a table as just like what it would like ultimately look like if you were to visualize it or to like see, it'd be like an Excel spreadsheet. So I'd have like this Excel spreadsheet called foods, and then there'd be a column name and price. And then whenever I added something to my data, I'm adding like tacos and $2 and pizza $12, etc. So you could just visualize.
This is a data table.
Yeah, it's a data table.
Okay, cool.
So now that I have that, like I can do a Rails C to like go interact with my Rails project. So now I do have a capital F. That is like my food model. So this is like that food nerd who knows how to go and interact with my database. So this, this food person has knows how to create something to the database with this create method. So I can give it a name, tacos, and a price, which is a float, $2.99. So my food model does the SQL call to actually insert that food into my database. So now I could do something like a food.all, and that's my model going to the database and grabbing all the foods. You could do another one, pizza. Like my food model could like find, I can give it an ID and it can find that one food. It has, it has a lot of these methods. It can destroy that I spelled destroy, yep, destroy. Can destroy something. So does that kind of, this whole like the M part of model view of model controller, is this a little more sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So that's my model. We haven't done anything with the controller, but we have that model now. And now we actually are storing stuff to our foods database table.
Now, in our VS Code, we're not going to have, or are we going to have a record of all the stuff we did in terminal? Like where you're creating these foods and stuff?
No, it's because your database does not, like your database does not live here in your Rails project.
Right.
It does live on your computer.
But it wouldn't really matter because it'd be in your database, right?
Yeah, it's in your, yeah, like when we installed like Postgres, you know, we have this little guy running Postgres QL14. If I stop this, I'm going to stop that, you know, do a Rails C foo.all. Object doesn't support inspect. Yes, that, yeah. I was expecting to get like a different error, but food.create, I mean, it's not working. There we go. That's what I was looking for. See, like I'm getting in it. It's like, hey, like Postgres is not running. It's not connected. So my
So
model,
when you create these things, they're all being stored in memory for the time being on your computer.
no, they're being, so let's talk about that really quick, because this is, it's a weird term. So if I do f equals food dot new burger price. Oh, it doesn't even like that. It won't even let me do that. Okay, so it's not, it won't even let me do that. Okay, so first of all, I'm getting the, like, since Postgres is not running, that is breaking. I thought it would at least let me do that one, but it's not. So I'm going to start Postgres. Let's see if I can run this now. Okay, now it's working. But so I have this variable, because this is kind of like, this is Ruby on Rails code right here. But really f is just a variable in Ruby. Now this variable is living in memory, f, but it does not have an ID. So what that's telling me is it's not in storage. What's the difference between memory and storage? If you like go to your like, you know, about this Mac, and you see these words like, how much memory do you have? How much storage do you have? What are the difference? What's the difference in those words? They kind of sound like the same word, right?
Memory short-term and storage is long-term.
That's a yeah, good way to think about it at a high level. Yeah, you can think of
Like temporary and permanent.
that's another good one. Permanent, yeah, that's another key difference. So one's more long-term and permanent. The other one is short-term and temporary. So I have this f variable. If I like exit out of my Rails console and, you know, start it up again, and I type f again, that's undefined because f was living in memory But once I stop that Rails console, like it just like it's no longer in memory. When you like start up your computer and you like open up an application, that application gets loaded into memory. Like iTerm is running in memory right now. If I were to close iTerm, then it like kicks it out of memory. But iTerm itself is in your storage. So when you click on your iTerm, icon, it opens up. So you can like turn off your computer and iTerm is going to still be there.
So
It's
memory
like-
is kind of linked with RAM.
Yes.
It's random access memory.
Yeah. So
It's like,
when we talk about memory, we're talking about RAM for sure. And when we talk about storage, we're talking about your like hard drive. So, but like there's like when I'm talking about like a Rails, like when I'm talking about like a programming language, like something living in memory, it's like while the program's running. So this variable f is going to be like stored in memory as long as, I'm in this Rails console. But yeah, as we saw, like the food.new, it stores it in memory, but I can see it's not stored on my database. And you can think about your database as like being stored on your hard drive, either on your computer or on the server. So if I want to actually try to save this to my database, I can do this. After I have the object in memory, I can call f.save. So now that actually did, so I can look at f, and now f has an ID. So I know like this is stored in storage. So I'm going to exit out of my Rails console, step back into it.
So if that's not stored anywhere in our Rails project, where is it stored?
So I quit my server or my console. I opened it back up. Is f going to be defined? Because I saved it to the database, right?
Yeah, it will be.
F was just a variable name.
Shoot. Okay.
So it's not. So I could say, but I could say, x equals food, or get my food model food.find and pass it the ID of that food that was created. There it is, x. There's that thing in my database.
Mhm.
Now, the variable I called it right here, f, that was just a variable in memory.
Yeah.
But I saved the data, the important stuff about that food in the database. So I have like the ID, the name, price, created at, updated at.
But the database is not in our Rails project.
If it was, it still would not matter because like f would not be, f is just like a Rails. F has nothing to do with the database.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I get that part, but I'm just wondering where the data is actually stored. Because I thought you said before that our Rails project wasn't our database.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to come in here and like find that food with ID 3 in your Rails project. Like you've created a database that lives elsewhere on your computer. I could like, there is a way to get to it. We're not going to get to it through, your Rails project, but there's like an app, there's this app called SQL Electron. I can connect to like my server that hosts all my database, and I can go connect to this like development database. And now I can like write some SQL in here. There's my data. So that like there's apps to like just be able to go in and look at my databases
What-
So is the point of the Rails project then to be able to manipulate and control all this?
The point, so that's the like your model, like your model knows how to go connect to that database. So when I do like a food dot all, you know, in Rails, I do a food dot all. I'm using my food model to go in, like my food model knows how to go out, like go connect to the database and run this command, grab all the foods, and then give them back to my
Oh.
control.
So the project is like the model then.
The project is like the model. Wait, what does that mean?
What we're doing in Rails is like the model.
No. Rails is the project. This is just where I'm like storing the data. The database is where you actually store the data.
Is the database Heroku again, or what is your database?
Heroku is where I can actually go put up my Rails project and a database. So it's like the combo, like it's where I can house those two things. So when I drew this little image, like, you know, we had our little potato guy. And like, he goes and talks to, like, have you ever seen this like this is usually the icon for like a database is like these 3 stacks. My model, so my controller goes, hey, I got a request to get all the foods. The food model goes, okay, I'll go to the database and grab it. I don't really don't get like so involved in like, where does the database live? Who cares where the database lives? The food model knows how to go grab all of that stuff from the database.
No, I'm really just more trying to understand what we're doing with each of these basically tools that we're using. I get the front end stuff, I get the API stuff, I get the React stuff, but when it comes to this, all the back end stuff, it's like when we make a Rails project, what are we doing with that? You know what I mean? And then how is that tied to the database? And then how is that all put together?
Yeah. So with our model, so we're doing, I'd say at like basic level, we have a food model. And when we also create that, we also create a table in our database. And let's just say like our database is like within this project. And we have a table that and think of that table as like an Excel spreadsheet where we can add entries that have a name and a price, and we can actually add values for those foods. Now we generated a food model, kind of, you know, this is actually the file. There's a lot going on right here with this arrow sign application record that is making our food model being able to go interact with our database so easily. So we have these methods like food.all and food.find. That one that can go in and like go into that Excel spreadsheet and go grab that stuff. And it can add stuff to that Excel spreadsheet and update it. So that's another maybe way you could think of our food model. It's like it's the guy who knows how, or it's the person who knows how to like work with Excel, like an Excel table. Because it's like, as we're starting to learn Rails, it's like we don't know how to do that. We don't know SQL. So we'll have our model do that for us. We'll learn some SQL eventually, but for now, we can just use our model to do all that for us. But right now, I'm only using the model, and the way I'm doing that is with the terminal. Now, that's not super useful, right? If I want to make this actually work, well, now I need like the controller to handle these, like to be able to like direct these requests and like actually go communicate with the model to grab them. So I'm going to create a controller, a foods controller. So we'll call this RailsG controller. And then just out of convention, we're going to just prepend this with API. I'm going to call this foods. Sweet. Now I have a foods controller. And the reason we do this is just like I'm creating this separation of concerns. You know, Rails is very conventional. MVC is a nice paradigm. So now I have this part of my application, you know, this foods controller whose job it is to kind of decide what to do when we get this request, these requests. And I'm going to write, let's just first start out like this. So I have my foods controller, and I'm going to start my server, my Rails server. Let's maybe kind of go through some of these errors. I think this can be another good way to kind of think about it. So we got to switch gears because now I'm on Chrome. So now I'm the client. I'm like the person ordering food. So I'm going to go. I'm just going to assume that like, I'm going to go to localhost 3001 because that's the restaurant I'm at. That is when I run Rails s-p 3001, that opens up a restaurant called localhost 3001. It's really 1207001. See, it's listening on this website, which is just like a local thing. I could type that in. It's the same thing. Cool. So I actually did a GET request to this website, and Rails knew how to handle this just kind of by default. Even though we haven't defined anything, it just knows how to do this. But that's not really useful. What I want to be able to do is I want to like go get a list of the foods, right? And as the client, I know, hey, wait, this is a foods restaurant. They should probably have like something like a GET request to like foods or a /API foods or something like that. Now, remember when I click enter in a Chrome browser, it does a GET request. So I'm technically doing a GET request. And I'm going to get rid of this one. I'm just going to call this localhost because I think that's they're the same thing. Localhost API foods. So I'm doing a GET request to this URL.
Do you want it to be 3001 though?
Yes, I do. Let's just do 3000. See what. If I do 3000, what's that?
You have some React, something going on somewhere. You have something
I have a
running.
React server running, I guess. Yeah, there it is. And yeah, it doesn't really care about this. I do API foods. It's like, hey, wait, that path is not found. It's not a valid. That's a React router for like, it's a React router saying, hey, that path's not found. So yeah, let's switch that to localhost 3001 because that's where my Rails server is running. Hit enter. I get this error. No route matches get API foods. So I just ordered, this was my order. like I'm at the restaurant localhost 3001, and I ordered a get API foods. And this restaurant's saying, hey, we do not have a route that's not on our menu. We don't have a route that matches. What you ordered is not on our menu. So if I want to add that to the menu, I go to my routes.rb. So now I'm back on the back end. So I'm going to handle that. Okay, let's do a get request API/foods. Now I'm saying, this is the menu item, but now and this is a Rails convention. I need to say where I want this to go. I'm going to say, hey, this should go to my foods controller. To whatever X. Or let's just do Y. Let's just say Y. Y pound X. Just to see what these are. Now I'm back to the client. So this let's just say localhost 3001. They're like a restaurant that's being built right now. So they're not really working. So we're going to go through these errors at this restaurant. Now it's saying, hey, I don't have a Y controller. And this is a Rails convention. It's going to look for a controller called Y, because this is an MVC paradigm. It's how Rails implements it. It's making this very easy because it's following this convention. It's doing a lot of stuff for us, which just makes us just as coders just allow us to solve problems and just write code. So I say, hey, no, I created a controller for this. I want you to, instead of going to that Y controller, I want you to go to the foods controller. I hit refresh. Didn't I generate a foods controller? API foods. Does it just want to be food? Uninitialized constant foods. Oh, sorry. I'm going to do this. Sorry, one thing. I don't know why I keep on forgetting to do this. So it's just part of this convention we do. I want to do a namespace API end. Sorry. I'm going to prepend everything with API. So now I can go look for that foods controller. Or let's just go back to Y. Try this again. So notice how now it's looking in an API folder for this Y controller. So it's going in my API folder. It's going to my controllers folder in the API, and it's looking for a Y controller. It can't find one, so it gives me this error. So now I might actually want you to go to the foods controller. Now I get a different error. The action X could not be found. Okay, so now it's saying, hey, in the foods controller, look for the method X. So in Ruby, to define a function, we do a def and then the name. And so now my foods controller, I have a method X. Did I save that? Oh, sorry. No, I'm in my foods controller. Def X. Not like that method name. Roots. Yo. I'm just gonna switch that to yo. Maybe X is. I don't know why I want to like X. Refresh. What's going on here? It's not like seeing these changes. Restart my server. I like broke this too many times. What? Okay. I'm getting a little stuck somewhere because it's not going to. It's still looking for this X method. Okay, let's try to break. It's like caching some stuff or something. API foods. Stop auto completing that. Goes 3001 API. Okay. Oh, so that gave me back a 204. Cool. So there's an example of a 200 success code, but it's a more specific one, 204. No content. I think that's why it wasn't like refreshing, because it's working, but it's not giving me back anything. So it's like, hey, this was successful, but you didn't return anything. So let's render JSON. Let's render some JSON. Localhost 3001 API/foods. And there we go. So I did a GET request. So on the client, I'm on Chrome. When I hit enter, I did a GET request to localhost 3001 API foods. In my routes, I defined a way, I defined that menu item. Oh, if I get a GET request from API/foods, I'm going to go to the foods controller to the yo method. So the food controller, we go to that yo method and it just renders JSON. So right now the food controller is not interacting with my model. The food controller is just, hey, you ask for some stuff. Okay, I'm going to give you this back. Does that make sense? Or what questions you have with this flow?
So if you change get foods to something different, it'll just take you to a whole different type of page with new data.
Okay, let's change this to a post, because I think this is good to kind of experiment. So routes. Remember, my routes is like my menu, right? So now I'm defining a route. If I get a post request to foods, go to the foods controller to the yo method. And that just returns, let's do this. Let's return the controller. It's the key. We'll render JSON so we can see, this is the foods controller. And method is yo. And I'm just going to switch this back to a get. Okay. So that what we did a get request that went to my foods controller and to the method yo. Let's switch this to a post. What do you think is going to happen if I hit refresh? So think about it this way too. When I'm in VS Code, here's another way that might help you kind of separate it. Everything I'm doing in VS Code is the back end. Any changes I'm making is affecting the back end. And this, the browser right now is my client. So I changed my menu. Now my client's going to try to order this. Is it going to work? Yes or no?
Probably not.
Probably not. That's a good guess. Because remember, when in Chrome, when I type in the URL and I hit refresh, it does a GET request by default. So maybe what might be a little better to see is like to pull up Postman, which I can do GET requests, I can do post requests. So let's go ahead and do a post request. So I'm doing a post request to localhost 3000 API foods. Is this going to work?
Needs to be 3001 for one thing, but it probably still won't work after that.
Yeah, because well, it's definitely needs to be 3001. Because you see how like this part right here, this URL, this part of the URL, you can think of that being the restaurant. My restaurant and like the address of the restaurant, HTTP localhost 3000. My restaurant's address is HTTP localhost 3001. And you know, different restaurants are going to have different menus. This menu I'm defining here is only at that localhost 3001 restaurant. So if I send this, I get a 404 error. So let's switch that to a 3001 API /API foods. Let's send that. That works. It matches that. It's like I went to McDonald's and I said, I want a hamburger. They have that method there. That's my hamburger. And then this step, this is just like in your Rails app, this is just to let you know, hey, this is where you should go. Go to the foods controller to the yo method. Okay, here's my controller. You call the yo method. All right, here's what I'm going to return.
How is a post request working in Postman, but it's not working through VS Code and through the client?
Not VS Code has nothing. VS Code doesn't have anything to do with the request. This is my server. So my.
But aren't we trying to do the same thing in two different places and it's working in one place and not in the other?
Well, okay, so I now have two clients. I could have, like, think of these two people wanting to go order at the restaurant. I could have the Postman client. I could have the Chrome client. The Chrome client, whenever I do a request, here's my URL. What am I missing though? That Postman, I can do in Postman. I can actually tell it the method. With Chrome, I can't give it the method. It just by default does a GET.
Okay.
When you go to like google.com, you're doing a GET request to that restaurant, and Google's going to have like that, like, oh, I got a request for, you know, that search page. Here you go. You can get it back. So I go to google.com. I send that, you know, the Google server handles that and gives me back this page. Now, is this JSON? What did Google give me back? What is this under the hood? It is HTML. And there's probably a shit ton of JavaScript associated with it. And CSS. But we're using, like, this is part of like the API, like APIs generally just get back like for now, we're just going to say they just get back JSON. Does that kind of make some sense? Let's do a get request in Postman. Let's do a get request to Google. There it is. That's what it's sending us back. So I can do the raw. Here's the raw HTML. That's like, I'm asking for that stuff. It's just raw HTML, and I can preview it. There it is. I wonder if I can actually like search in here. Doesn't, yeah, it doesn't have like doesn't look like it has like the JavaScript and the functionality set up. Get request to Google. There is your website. But it doesn't look like Postman can like handle like the JavaScript. Sweet. Does that help kind of visualize that? So my restaurant is not google.com. It is, this localhost 3001.
Right now it's difficult because I just feel like there's a lot of different terms and analogies sort of being thrown around.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time keeping track of what's what.
Yeah, no, I'm about the same. I'm trying to do notes. I'm gonna end up going through this video again for more notes and to follow along with it when I'm able to pause and whatnot. But
cool. So yeah, key. Just remember, like, it's the combination of the HTTP verb and the URL. So, and there's really, there's some more verbs, but like we just care really about the get, post, put, and delete. That's all we're going to be using. So I use an HTTP verb, then I give it the address, and then I can also, ask for like, so this is like the address of the website or restaurant, if you want to think of it that way, and then, the route. So API foods. Oh yeah, so this is a 404 action not found. Because in my menu, I defined that as a post. So now I need to do a get, and now I can define a post. And those, right now I have them going to the same controller, to the same method. So those do the same two things. But now let's do the final step. So we have we kind of looked at the model separately. And we kind of looked at like the controller separately. Let's combine the two. Instead of rendering JSON, this stuff, let's go use our model. So now the controller is going to be like, hey, food model, go give me all of the foods. So there's a lot of stuff happening in, this food.all. That's our food model. It has an all method. It's going to do the SQL call to go to our database, go get all of the foods, and then it's going to plop them right here, as a array of objects. So now if I do a get request to API foods, that now gets me back all my foods. Now I can call this method, like that works with this method being called yo. But what the convention is, if we're grabbing all of something or a list of something, we call this the index method. And that is just convention. So a get to /foods, hey, go to the foods index method. And, I could just leave a comment here. return all foods from. So this is called when a get API foods is requested. From client. And yeah, there's a lot of like Rails is doing a lot for us. Like all we have to do is kind of just define out our menu, but Rails is like setting up all this, work behind the scenes to handle this request, to get the request, to kind of parse it. And so all we have to do is just kind of, hey, here's the menu item. Here's where I want to take you. Here's where I want it to go. And so this goes back to kind of the question, well, why do we use like an MVC paradigm or something like, or why do we use these paradigms? Is because we can now make our code. I know you're confused with it right now because it's all new, but this really makes our code super clean and really readable, really easy to reason about. Once you kind of get a grasp of this, it's like, oh, it's so nice. This is like so simple. Once you
question, what does that other website do that's not Chrome?
What
is the other website doing that isn't Google Chrome?
What is the other website that's doing this?
Postman one?
The Postman.
Yeah,
This is not a website. This is a app. This
An
is
app.
a desktop app.
we don't have that downloaded yet, right?
No. You want to download it? Or actually, since you're just watching, you don't need to download it yet. Because if you're just watching, you want to be able to, you want to be able to do a get localhost API foods. Why not?
Because we're just watching, we haven't like started.
Yes. You don't have you could go run localhost 3001, but it's not going to be this project. This localhost, it's called local because it's running on my computer. There's no way you could access this. Not that, I mean, I'm sure there probably is. But
So we technically need an application like that?
you would need, so I'm in my Rails project, this food demo. Like this is my terminal. There's my food demo project. And here's the VS Code project. This is where I'm making the changes. So I'm making changes here and it's going to apply here. So when I start my server, Rails S-P, I give it a certain port. That's starting up a Rails server in this project, and it's running it on localhost 3001. So this is running on my machine. So watch when I do let me just throw these side by side so we can see it. So my server is now running. It's listening for requests. I'm going to hit send. It started a get request to API foods. Oh, there's the SQL call, to get all the foods from foods. Let's do a get request to localhost 3001. Yo. I'm going to send that. Started a get, so my server, since I went to localhost, I did a get request to localhost 3001. It got this request. It got a request for yo. So it got a get request yo. And it's like, oh, hey, I'm going to give you back this because I don't have that. And there's my status 404, not found. So I could go in my like I could go in here. And since this one's not prepended, I could go define like a get yo yo yo. Okay, take that to the, I think I would have to like append it. API foods index. API foods index. So it's saying, okay, it got this yo. And now it can't find a food controller. It can't find API food controller because I had spelled this food. So it's like, I don't see a foods controller or a food controller. Let's make that an S. Send. There's my foods. See, this one is not my, I did a localhost 3001 yo, 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 yo. It doesn't have that API in front of it. So it's not within this namespace right here, but I handle it like do, hey, you get a yo, 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 go to API. So go to that API folder, look for a foods controller, and that foods controller go to the index method. And now I get rid of that route. There's my 404, not found. So let's do it. Let's do another one. And and I'll get off the uncommon ones. Let's just do a, let's say I want to get one food. Now, if I want to create a menu or like an item that gives me one food, the client is going to have to give me the ID. I don't know what they're going to want. They have to give me the specific ID. And hey, if you give me a GET request to this URL, foods ID, then I'm going to take you to the foods controller to the show method. And you know what this should do is this should return the food from that database matching ID passed. Foods controller. So let's do a def show. Actually, let's just do this. Let's not have the show method. So I'm saying, hey, go to the foods show. What error do you think I'm going to see if I don't have the show method defined? Probably that the show method is not defined.
Undefined.
So I go to API foods and then I need to give it an ID. Say one, cool. There it is, the action, and I'm going to go back to, that's fine. There it is, the action show could not be found. This is a 400 error. It's a little weird. Sometimes like that really, you know, it's kind of giving me a weird error since that's this 404, because that really is the back end, but I need to go define the show method. But it's kind of like, it still is not like a not found error. So let's define it. Now it's defined, I send. Now there's my status 204. Just go in and type some random variable. Let's do a send. There's my 500 error. And then if I go look at my server, so as I'm doing all these requests, you know, my server is showing me what's going on. So now I have a 500 error. It's saying, hey, undefined local variable or method, that thing I just typed. So that's a server error, right? Because that's nothing. So what I want to do here, let's return, I don't know, X. can't read. I'm sorry, I'm doing JavaScript. Render JSON. So just watch the server as I hit send. It does a get API foods, and then it returns that Axios. But notice right here, it's sending some parameters. And this in Ruby is what's called a hash, and a hash is very similar to a JavaScript object. But it's just a key value pair. So I have a parameter with ID, this ID key, and whose value is 1. Let's go switch this thing in my URL to, yo. The parameter is the key name is ID, the value is yo. So the value is just whatever I put here. The key name is going to be whatever I call it here. ID XXX. So I can call this whatever, but so this is kind of like a weird way to like name a variable. It's not, it's a parameter. And the name of this parameter is going to be ID. So if I get a get request to API foods and then anything after, it's going to like render that thing. Like that is going to be how I can grab that, and how I can grab that right here in my controller is through this params object. And I do a colon ID. I'll just call it key ID. So now that's how I can grab that ID. Well, I don't want to just render the ID back. That's silly. What I want to do is now I can go get that Excel, my food Excel guy who knows how to interact with my database. And I'm going to say, hey, food model, go find that food. Params ID is going to be the ID. I'll say this. Params ID will be the ID given in the URL by the client. So render JSON. Maybe I could like find it first, so this is not all in one line. So we find food, get back the food. Send that. So this is a 404. Well, why is that not working? Because I now think it's working. That looks right. What could maybe be wrong now? And
You don't have anything with an ID of 1.
yeah, it's telling me that right there in the response. It's also telling me in the server, hey, it couldn't find food with ID 1. So do you kind of see how that one is a client error? I said, hey, get this food that doesn't exist. I need to make sure I give them ID that exists. So I have an ID with 3. Cool. They know how to can find me a food that doesn't exist. Index and show. Questions on these? Let's take a break. I'll stick around for a second if anyone has any questions, but if not, let's just come back at 11:55.
Is the params word, is that like a Ruby syntax? Like, do we always use that? Or, I mean, yeah, do we always use that to pass in something that we're looking for?
So yeah, because if I, if I just come in here and type like params, yo, and then like ID, and I send this, I get an error. Like it's saying, hey, paramjo is undefined, but Rails is like nice enough to be like, wait, did you mean params? I know about params. So yeah, params is kind of something that's set up behind the scenes, and it's a way that, it's that Rails knows how to grab those from the URL. There's actually another way I can send params in a URL, and that's like with a question mark. And then I can give it like a key and value and an ampersand if I want to send in more. So yeah, this is undefined. That's going to cause a 500 error because Rails does not know what paramjo is, but it does know what params is because it defines it for us behind the scenes.
Okay, got it.
So yeah, now it like knows how to like read through that URL. Like this is another way you can send parameters through a URL, like this question mark. I'm sure you've seen that question mark.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've seen that. I've always wondered what it was.
Yeah. So it's a way. This is how you can do like max price equals 4. So now I'm getting sent this max price. So I could do, well, I mean, it's kind of weird to do this with find, but I could send like, hey, maybe I want to get all the foods under $4. Probably want to do that with when I'm just showing. But I could grab all the foods, say max price equals 4. Well, why isn't that filtering? Well, I would need to use that in here. Trims like max. Or actually, we'll do it this way. Food.all. I could do a food.where. Price. Oh, you can go take a break if you want, but I could go say like, hey, instead of grabbing all the foods, I could say, I can use this where, the price is actually, I don't know how to do this without SQL. I'm gonna have to Google this. I don't get into SQL right now. Where?
So are they just kind of like words that we'll learn as we go, like params and where? Like, will we just learn that as we go, or is there like something we can reference, kind of like MDN docs we can reference for JavaScript?
Yeah. So we'll definitely so the .where and like the .all .create. How do you find these? These are active record rels.
Oh, okay.
Because what really happens if we look at our food model, what's happening is our food model is like inheriting from application record. But if I look at application record inherits from active record. So our food is technically, it's not only is it a food model, but it's this active record thing. So it has all of these active record methods on it. So, you know, we can find, like, we can use this find by method, update all, update, find by, destroy, destroy
these-
by.
Pre-built methods, or are they like SQL
This is pre-built methods on Rails.
inside? Okay.
So like it's like you inherit, like think of all the things you inherit from like your parents and from all like evolution, like you inherit a way to digest food.
Well, JavaScript has pre-built methods, so this would be like pre-built methods for this language.
It's more it really is, it's more for the active record. It is your model is an active record. So you could do like active record methods. It's just like it's one like a list. I mean, there's active record. There's so much stuff you can do with it. Like it's a huge, and we're going to get into like a lot of it. But yeah, here are just the methods to retrieve things from the database. So, and these are all available to our food model because it is an active record.
Is it common to have it something other than an active record? Like, is there different things? Like, you know how you have in the code that's referring to the active record? Is there other stuff that it would be? Yeah, that part.
Our model is always going to be an active record.
Okay.
Our controller, you know, inherits from action controller. So like they're inheriting all of these things from separate things. It's like, you know, like a bacteria inherits stuff from like bacteria things. So they can do things that bacteria can do. Or like a bird inherits from like bird things, so they can like fly. So the concept of inheriting qualities from these parent level model like objects, we call them classes. You know, they can be different. They can be their own things, but then they can like, we can share code. It's just this is object-oriented programming. I don't know if anyone here has done any object-oriented programming, but
Yeah, I have a little bit. Yeah.
but we don't like, I'm talking about this on break, so like you don't need to really
Yeah.
I think for now, yeah, we don't even need to really for this method, and we'll get into more active record stuff and like these methods we can do, but we're just keeping it like very conventional and very straightforward right now.
Okay, cool.
Okay, let's get started. Nice video, Austin. Like I said, I probably have a couple of videos like that.
A friend sent it to me and it was just, I was like, oh my God, that's James.
I make music, or I don't do it so much anymore, but like I've definitely made music. So
That's cool.
and I've definitely made some stupid music videos. So that is really like not far off from me. That guy's like a lost brother. Okay. I don't know who that person is, but cool. All right. Let's get started. Yeah, so before we do, how you feeling? Is this any better than yesterday? Like as far as it making sense?
I
feel-
definitely think so.
I feel like it's worse, but maybe I'm just trying to, I don't know.
Oh, you might be like try not to. So there is a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, and there's just no way you could know what that is. Or I mean, there is, you could go learn about it, but for now, like see it as like just let the Rails magic be the Rails magic, the stuff it's doing for you.
Mhm.
Because really it is, for now, it's as simple as, let's just do the get request. Like I'm in Chrome. I go to localhost 3001 because I want to see all the foods that are in the database. So I'm doing a get request. So I'm the client. I'm doing a get request to this path. And boom, it works. So what happened in that split second, before this came back, is it did an HTTP.
That's
GET.
that cycle that we talked about, right?
What was that?
It's that cycle that we talked about earlier.
Yeah. So in that split second, I did the HTTP GET request. And that now that hits my server. That request goes to my server. And I've defined a way to handle a GET request to API/foods, which is happening here. And when the server gets that request, it says, hey, go to the foods controller to the index method. So we go to the foods controller to the index method. So now I'm in my controller. My controller goes, hey, food model, will you go to the database and give me all the foods from the database? The food model goes, sure, here's all your foods. And then the controller goes, okay, I'm going to render back that as JSON. Okay, render JSON, that's now my response back to my browser. There's my foods. So that request response cycle happened.
Can you go back to Visual Studio Code?
Mhm.
So what is that doing below it, the dev show?
Well, I have more than one routes that someone can go to. Maybe someone doesn't want to get all the foods. They just want to grab one of the foods. Well, I have a path for that. That is foods, and then you give me the ID of a food. So 2. I hit enter. And I get an error because I need to spell that foods. I didn't give it the exact, it's like I went to McDonald's and ordered a hamburger, but I forgot the R. And it's like, sorry, I don't know what that is. There's an error. So I have to spell it exactly with the HTTP verb. So now I have a different path, a different menu item that gives me back one food. And I define that, and that's also defined in my routes. Hey, if you give me a URL that has foods, but it also has something after it, go to the food show method. Okay, so that's the show method. So if it matches that route, we'll do this work. So go find the food from the ID that was given and return back that food. Okay, there's your response. Status 200. Or sorry. And it's easier, let's maybe just do this in here because we can like easily see the response. /2. There you go.
I feel like that 5 minutes right there was more helpful than anything else we've done today. So I just gotta I gotta stay on a high level. I think I just gotta not
Yeah.
worry so much about all the specifics.
We're at the high level, and then like we'll because that's the thing now. Like I'd say let's like now go do some, let's go add this to React. Okay. Instead of filling out all of these methods, let's now go into a React app. So does for this, I don't even care what, you can use your homework project. You can use whatever. Just go find a React app that you have that works. So yesterday, I'm just going to do my, because we're just going to do the stuff in the data provider for now. I think I called it this, the link CRUD, the API. So, right, I have a React app now. And maybe, I think maybe also just watch this. I think just watch it. This might just be better. And then you can, go try to code this. So I'm going to start my React server. Okay, so I'm getting this error. It's like something's already using port 3000. I'm going to say no. I'm going to want my Rails server. Oh, that project was already running. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start my Rails server on port 3001. So on the left, I have my Rails server running. On the right, I have my React server running. So if I go to localhost 3000, that loads up my React app. If I go to localhost 3001, that loads up my Rails app. And once we get into development with React and Rails, this is how you're going to do it. You're going to have both of them running separately.
Does Rails always run on 3001?
It's not that, it doesn't have to. It's not like a requirement. I could have my yarn running on 3000. I could have it running on, something else. We're just going to, this is how we're going to do it. It's just, just for development. So these are now running on my machine. They're both local hosts, just different ports. So I'm going to go into my data provider. So now I'm in React land. So I think this is where it gets hard because now you've been like thinking about all of this in, Rails. Now I kind of got to switch gears and think about it in React. So now I'm like in my client. So now I'm like a front end developer. So I'm gonna make a method called get foods. And so I know if I do a get request to like localhost 3001 API foods, that gives me back an array of foods, right? With an ID, name, and price. Is there any confusion on just me saying that in English? I have my Rails server running on port 3001. If I do a get request to localhost 3001 API foods, that should return the array of foods, right? In that, like that's.
Can you go back to your terminal for a second? My React app won't boot up. Just trying to figure out why.
Yeah, like I said, I'd probably just watch because maybe you're on like it's probably maybe the port. You might have another port running, but because this one I do want to show us using the localhost Rails app, so then we can kind of see them side by side, like these servers running side by side. But is there on just this one part right here? Does that make sense? That's what we just did, right? We developed on the back end, we got this working. Our back end can handle a get request, you know, to API foods. Right? We've tested that. Localhost 3000, this is a get request. That works. So now I want to do this in React, or I want to actually, yeah, I want to in React do this API call. Now we have used Chrome to do an API call. We have used Postman, but now I want to do this within JavaScript. I want to do a GET request to this link. What tool do I use for that? Or what library, I should say?
Axios?
Yeah, I'm going to use Axios. So that's when we added that library Axios. That knows how to do it. I can do an Axios. I use that Axios library we imported. And it has this nice syntax of like, you know, the method is going to be the HTTP method. So I can do a get and then pass it the URL. We're going to see a way later where we don't have to like put in localhost, but for now, I'm just going to throw that in there. Await. And so now I got to do like, here's how I do this in JavaScript is I get the, and I'll just spell this out. The response equals that.
Oh, you set that localhost 3001 to work in the back end, and now you're calling it in the front end of JavaScript to pull out that array or the information that you have in the database?
Yes. So I'm doing a GET request to localhost 3001.
Which you had already set up in the back end.
Yeah. So I could also just, you know, I could type this URL. Maybe I should just paste that in here because I know that's working. That probably has the HTTP in there too. Cool. So yeah. And then maybe for now I can just do a console.log response. So now I have this get food methods. This is in my data provider. I need to somehow call this method. I think this is where this gets confusing. It was like, well, now I'm just doing like React stuff. So I'm like, okay, now I need to like somehow call this method. It's not as easy as just going to like Chrome and refreshing. It's like, wait, now I got to set this up in JavaScript. So here's my method that should do that. I'm going to pass this to my provider. And then maybe I make like a new file called foods.js. It's like, well, crap, well, now I need to like set up a link to go to here. It's like, okay, well, let's just set up a foods page so I can actually kind of test this out. Foods. I actually need to put something in there. I'm just going to copy this. Because this actually has some code. So what I want this component to do is, it's my foods component. It's going to get that get foods method from my provider.
So this is like the button homework that we were just doing, but now you're using it to get the foods from the API that you just created.
Yeah. So really, I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to call that get foods method, but get foods. So yeah, I had to like go in, I had to like make a component. That's just, now it's just calling that method, which is just going to log the response. I mean, it's quite a bit of work just to see if it's working, which is part of the reason like Postman's nice, is because I know this is working because I've tested, like I know my backend's working. So now it's just getting the front end kind of set up. So I have this foods method or this foods component. Now import it. So while we're in here, we have these paths about foods link.
How did you import it like that? Did you just do a command link, quick link? What was that you just did?
I hit tab. So it's suggesting, hey, foods. If you hit tabs, it will
Import it at the top.
it auto imports it. So yeah, I'm just typing it out, foods, hit tab, boom, auto imports it. Okay. So now after all of that work, go to my foods. Now I did localhost / foods. Is that doing an API call to my database?
Not to your database, but to your React, right?
It's actually
Because then it's
not
your
doing-
database 3001.
Not
3001.
really doing any requests. So the React router, your React router are not, it's not technically doing any GET request. It's kind of just making it look like it's just kind of being nice and like kind of doing stuff with the URL. But yeah, we're actually, the only GET request we do with our React app is like when you first load it. That gets your thing, but from here on out, we're actually not doing any requests. And part of the reason we like, how you can, maybe one of the ways you can look, especially with how we're going to do things, is like if I go to my app.js, you can kind of ask yourself, is this a React router link or is this like an API call? Well, these ones are appended. I mean, it's not, we don't see Axios anywhere. We also don't see them appended with API. So if it's not appended or prepended with API, you know that's a React router thing. If you see a link that has, you know, API / something, then you know that's probably something to do with Axios or like a Axios call or an API call. So now if I inspect, I click get foods. I'm logging my response. So my response, it's technically, it's not just the array of things. I'm getting like a status key on there. So there's the 200. I get some headers. But I'd say for now that the important things we want to look at is the data and the status, because that's telling us it's successful. But the fact that we also have the response.data, there's our array of things. So now I have this button set up in React where it actually does the Axios call. It does the GET request. It gets back this response. Cool. And now it becomes a.
If you checking your terminal on the Rails side, will it show that there is a request sent out?
Yeah, exactly. So look, and yeah, perfect. I wanted to show that. So I did a whole bunch of clicks, right? Let me just do like some dashes here so we can see where I'm at. So I'm going to go get foods, get request, API foods. So that's, I can go in and look at my Rails server. And it's doing the, like, it got those requests. And yeah, that's what Axios, this is what the Axios is doing. It's going behind the scenes, it's creating that HTTP request. So now, so this is grabbing, our foods from DB.
Now, another question, why are you using Axios.get, and isn't Axios a different database?
Axios is like a tool. It's a library. So, because the question, I'm in JavaScript. Like I'm in just a JavaScript file right now. How do I do a HTTP GET request to a website? I don't know, like, well, there's a library that makes that very easy for us. There's this library called Axios. This was something, when we clone this repo, I just changed them. Or when I first created this repo, I did like a yarn add Axios.
Axios, yeah.
So I added that package because I want to use that package here. And now I can use it. And Axios has a method, it has these methods on it that, I can match the HTTP verb. So I wanted to do a GET request to this URL. I mean, it's really clean, right?
See, I was confused because I'm thinking that Axios, like I understand what it's doing, but the part that I'm confused with is the Axios part, because I understand that was like a free online database that we went to. So I was wondering, how is that working for a local host?
How is
the
okay.
Axios? Why do you have to put Axios to get a local host?
Well, it's just the website. I could use let me just do this. Axios is not the website. Axios is a tool that does the HTTP requests.
Oh, okay. All right. That just answered my question then.
Okay.
That's what I was wondering.
I could do another get foods. I don't know. Let's see if this is actually working. Oh, that's an error. So some sort of error is occurring. Try catch. So actually now I'm trying to access a different. I'm no longer trying to access my server running on my computer. I'm trying to access the server you're using to grab the links, but I actually tried to add the food stuff there, but I don't think it's working. I'm getting an error. I'm getting a 500 error. How do I go check those errors? Well, I need to go like, where did I actually push?
This thing on Heroku is something that you created that we're supposed to be accessing.
The thing on Heroku is the thing you're using for the homework. Okay. So here's my, I can do a,
That's something you made, right?
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm trying to log into this. Is it gonna not let me? Where is, okay. I'm logging into Heroku. I'm now logged in. So what I
What's
need to,
Heroku?
I'm what?
What's Heroku?
Heroku's where I'm like where we can host live sites. Actually, I need to run a migration. I'm kind of sidestepping here. I need to run a migration on my Heroku's database because I created a new table. So I need to do these 2 steps for this to work. Okay, let me see if it works now. So sorry, going back to my React app. I was getting a 500 error from my website that's living on Heroku. I just ran a couple commands. Get foods. And there we go. So, so what I had to do, I actually had to go into my Heroku database. Oh, I deleted them. I had to create a table and then I seeded it to create some dummy data. So you should be able to go. So I have these 2 links and let me kind of just put them side by side. So I have a Axios.get that goes to localhost 3001 API foods. This localhost 3001, this is a server that's running on my machine that can handle this request. I also have a server running on Heroku that can also handle this request to API foods. They're 2 different databases, so they're going to have 2 different sets of data. But they both, this one would work for you because this one is on the interwebs. This one only works for me because it's on my machine.
Can you, just for kicks and giggles, can you try to retrieve stuff from both so just we can see what's on what's on which? Like what data is on which?
So I can do 2 Axios calls, no problem there. I can log those. And I'll say like, localhost for this one.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you.
That's response 1, and this is Heroku. So we refresh, click get foods. So my local host that has tacos and pizza, $2.99, $12.99. I wonder if these are actually the same. Tacos and pizza, are those exactly the same?
Is that just because of how you wrote them?
Yeah, you can tell what's on my mind. But they're different. You can sell,
Right. I guess it was just confusing because they were the same, so I was just confused.
yeah.
But that's
The
just
cre- the
coincidence.
created at are different, and let's do this. Let's go into my, this one will be easier to change. I can do a Rails. Okay, so I'm going to step into my local host. I'm going to step into the context of my local database. And I'm going to do a food.create name. We'll call this local burger. Price $29.95. Okay. I could also go ahead. I want to just see this exit out of here. I need to like log into Heroku again, Heroku login. So now I'm going to log into my Heroku account, like my Heroku database.
Yeah, the
Just
one.
this
Okay.
little tool. So I can do like a Heroku. Don't really worry about these commands, but can do a Heroku run Rails C. So now I can step into my Rails project that's living up in Heroku. So what we're kind of getting at right here, or what you're kind of seeing is I have these different environments. I have a production environment and I have like a development environment. I have a production database. The production database is like everyone can see that. That's like people can go to that website and that data is going to be shared. But I also have this development database and development environment that only I'm going to be able to see on my computer. So I can do a, so here I can go ahead and create a food on my Heroku database. Call this global burger. Get this a price of $39.95. They're expensive burgers, but they're worth it. Cool. And then I can go ahead and exit out of here. Start up my local server. Rails S-P 3001. Okay. Let's go ahead and get, I'm going to clear this. Let's go ahead and get foods. There's my data. That has my local burger. That was $29.95. If I look at my Heroku data, that has that global burger whose price is $39.95.
Super good example. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. And that, I think that you don't really have to totally understand that. I think the key takeaway with that demo, I think that would really benefit if the one thing you can take away from that is this concept of different environments, like a production environment, development environment. So there's actually, I have two different databases. I actually have two different Rails projects running. And therefore I have two different, like here's my development one, here's the production one. Cool. So that's my get foods. But maybe I don't just want to log that. Now, like after I do the get stuff, now I just switch mindsets and now it's like, oh, well, now I want to render this to React. So now I kind of can just not even think about what we've been talking about all day long. And now it's like, how do I show this to my app? Well, I need some state. So now I'm kind of like done. I'm out of like the API stuff. I'm just like, okay, it's done. I can ignore it. Now it's like a React thing. I want to create some foods state. So I'm going to have, and I'm going to keep track of like a foods array. So I come in and I create some state. Empty array. And maybe I can have like foods local. Let's call this foods dev for development and foods production. Here I can do like a set foods dev to be response 1.data and foods production or foods prod to be response 2.data. I can like get rid of those logs because I'm just going to show these. Cool. So why not have two different food state? Because I'm doing two different calls. So now I can do can go ahead and send these to my data provider. So I can grab them in other components. So I got my foods dev, foods prod. Now, is this kind of confusing just to like totally switch gears like this? Like we're doing all this API stuff and then it's like, boom, we're back to like just state in React.
For me, since I know API, like it makes more sense to watch it in API and then understand what you're doing in backend. So for me, like doing this, it totally clicks.
Yeah.
I think this is like helping it make more sense because this we're already pretty familiar with. So like seeing how to link the backend and front end is making it easier.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah, that can sometimes help too, because sometimes you just when you're working with something and you have no idea how it's working, and then you see it work, it makes some like sparks go off in your brain.
Well, it's like my native language is English, right? I'm looking at this right now. To me, this is English. And then when you switch to backend, like it's French or something.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't get it at all. Like I can't follow it at all. But
And
this is translated into something that I know, and then all of a sudden I get it.
That's fine. I'm just, and yeah, it takes time. I'm just having some of those, hopefully some of the concepts just slowly start to sink in.
I think having the backend written in Ruby too is a little confusing.
Yeah.
Even though like I've done some Ruby before, it's just weird switching back and forth.
Yeah, definitely. But I'll guarantee you Ruby is so much easier, especially with how we use it. It's so much easier to write than JavaScript. So I think when we used to start out with a Ruby, like people got cozy with it pretty quick because it's a nice language. It's also not as functional driven. And then you switch to JavaScript and people are like, oh.
Yeah.
Like start with the hard one and then we'll spend some time with Ruby and you'll probably really like the syntax of Ruby once you.
Isn't like when Ruby was created, wasn't it supposed to be like written like an actual like spoken language?
That was kind of like one of
that was the whole idea, right? So when you look at it, it's like
really readable, really coder friendly.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of one of their big goals they had. And it's lovely to read. Okay. So now I can grab my foods state. So I have my foods dev and foods prod. And let's do an H1. Development. Foods, I should maybe be a little more clear. Foods from development database. You think I would be able to spell development? Dude, there's just something wrong with my brain.
DEVE.
DEVOL. I am a developer and I can't spell development.
You just do dev.
Dev. I also have my degree in human development and I can't spell the word development. So there's something wrong with my brain when it comes to spelling. I can spell it like 80% of the time. Sometimes I just can't. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to use that nice little JSON.stringify so I don't have to like spend so much time trying to make this look pretty, but I can just see the data. And then we'll do foods from production. And that's foods prod. Okay. Now we can see those two different things once we click get foods. Sweet.
And did you define, or is dev local and production is global?
Yeah, which one's local? Which
Is
one's
dev from your local thing? And
Okay,
then
yeah. So let me clarify that. So that would be, yeah. Let me just copy the URL so we can see it. So remember that the development is going to be the local host that's running on localhost. And that's going to be my database on my machine. And then the production data I'm grabbing from,
that's the thing you have on Heroku.
yeah, the one I have on Heroku.
Got it.
Cool.
So this is what we have to do on tonight's with the homework, but yesterday is just doing this.
Well, I don't know how many of you started. Did you start on the links homework where it's like you get the links, you're able to
That's
create?
right. There's as much as I have.
Okay.
And I don't understand it fully, so it's, you know.
Cool. So let's do this. Let's let's get create working. Now, create a food working just to kind of see this process. So we're going to do, because one way you can kind of like, and especially once we do it work more with Rails, but kind of seeing this done in different ways, because there's a lot of different ways we can kind of build these out. I can build out my back end first. I can build out my front end first. Like you can completely build out your front end without a back end and make a couple changes once your back end's done and it will all work. You can build out your back end without giving a crap about the front end, really. Or you can go through and do like your get function in your back end and then your front end. And then when that's working, then you can go do the update. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I think it's kind of nice to show different ways. So yesterday we did all of our back end, and then we started to work on the front end. Today with foods, we got some of our back end working, right? We have like the get all foods and we have the show one food working. So let's go, let's do the create, but I'm gonna work from the front end first. And maybe like, and kind of show you how I would, like my thought process if I was doing the create without having a back end working. Like there's no back end working, but let me show you how like I can make some assumptions because I know how we do, because we're going to be following conventions. So I can make some assumptions and I can really just make this work very easily. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a method in my front end called add food. Cool. Const add food. Expecting this to take a food. And let's just do console.log. Just handle this method really quick. So I'm going to throw this to my provider. And then in my foods, I'm going to go ahead and pull this method out. And you know what? Let's just build a form really quick. Let's actually do this really quick. So on this form, I'm going to have a on click. I call this method handle. Well, yeah, let's call this handle add food. Or I can just call this, since this might be my only form, let's just call this handle submit. So do a const handle submit, take that event, e.prevent default so my page doesn't refresh.
Right there. How do you know where to put this? You went from the form on clicked up to the right below the const get foods and above the return. Like, yeah, how do you know where that goes? I don't know how to transfer any of this. So one of my questions yesterday was with the TA, I was trying to implement styling. I didn't know how to change my code in order to implement this stuff. Like, how do you know where to
Like
put this
handle submit
information?
goes, how do I know my handle submit goes here and not like here?
Yeah.
Well, one way I can tell is like I throw that in there, it breaks. But more fundamentally, like I have a foods function and it returns JSX. So this return, this is like this is the JSX that this foods returning. If I want any functions, any helper functions, I need to throw those like above the return. So I want a function called handle submit that handles the submit. So that's why I throw it above the return.
Okay.
And I know this handle submit's going to be clicked, or it's going to be called whenever when I have a button on here. Because if I have a button inside of a form, and when that button's clicked, it triggers the on click callback. It's just like an HTML JSX thing. Console.log clicked. So I have a form. In that form, I have a button. When that button's clicked, and if I have a on click handler, which is this function, it's going to run that function. And I could
Wait,
test.
why would you have an on click function on a form? Wouldn't it be on change?
Thank you. It'd be on, sorry, it's on. You're right. It's not on change. It's on submit.
On submit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to.
Oh,
run.
and then input would be on change.
Yeah, inputs
right?
on change.
Okay, cool.
I always get the, okay. So yeah, so I click add, that logs my click. And then inside of there, I'm eventually going to want to call this add food method. So now when I click, it clicks that clicked and then it logs the food. Well, I want to pass that a food. Well, I need to like build that out. So now I need like and I should probably do this in like its own separate component, right? Like a food form, but whatever. Let's make it a little messy. So I need my use state hook. So right now, like once again, I don't really care about this API stuff. I'm just like setting up the UI. I could like not care about the database right now. I'm just focused on the UI stuff, getting this form up to date. So I could have a set name equals use state. I'm not going to worry about update, and then I'd have a price. Oh, I guess that can be an empty string too. So now I can come in and create these inputs. So the value would be name. I'll change equals set name target value. This is just kind of stuff you'll find there can be some repetition. Then price. It's going to be price. Set price. So what I'm going to want to do here is when I add food, I want to pass it the name and price from my form. I can get rid of that click because I know it's working. Go into my form. Let's do like a sauce 12. Now when I do that food, I have my name, it's sauce, and the price is 12. So my data provider, sweet, it's there. I'm passing the values from my form to my data provider. So now I can go back to this add food method, whatever it is.
Yeah, but if you were to refresh the page, that's going to be gone. Or did that get added to the database?
Yeah, definitely nothing added to the database.
Okay. We're not at that point yet.
Yeah. I just got to the point where what I was trying, I have a form. I set up my form. I wanted to get that data from from my foods component to my data provider. Because I decided I want to do, because this is where that state lives. So I want to add it there. So now I can do this. I can do it.
Yeah, and then from here you can either display it or you can add it to the database. So you can do whatever you want, right?
Yeah. So now I have it. Now I can go ahead and try to do stuff with it. So I can now try, and I want this to be, and I can start thinking about the database. So I can do a try catch. So I can do a let response equals await. What's going to be the URL for this? So you could say, I don't know, we haven't defined it yet, right? We have not done this in the back end. We have not set this up.
Use something on your local host though, right?
Let's just say I'm a front end developer. And because this is our React project. We have if I go to my routes file, there it is. Those are my paths for my local host. They don't have a menu item for creating a food.
Gotcha.
So it's not going to work. So I'm done, right? I can't do anything more. Right? Wrong. What's the URL going to be? If me and my team are kind of following this convention of prepending with the API and following standard routes.
So would it be the local host?
Okay, that's the first part. So await
HTTP localhost 3001 API /API
/API
/foods.
Cool. Now this is going to be an Axios call, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Axios.get.
It's not a get, right?
Oh, because you're trying to add, so it'd be
Yeah, I'm
wait,
adding.
What are you doing? You're updating?
This one I'm adding. Add
adding.
food. So it's a post to API /foods. But this one I actually need to like the get, I don't need to send it any data because I'm not like creating anything. With a post and a put, I actually want to like give this the food.
And that food variable is back on the foods page.
This, well, this is the thing I
Oh.
logged. This is the thing these are the values I'm getting from my form.
Oh, that's defined as the parameter food.
Yeah, this is that's when I log food, that's what it is. It's an object with name and price. And that's perfect because that's what I want to send to my backend.
So what you just logged in is in that what you have highlighted right there.
What? Sorry, would you repeat that?
So that parameter food is what you just typed on right there. And when it logged it, that's the food parameter right there. And you're trying to send it to the Axios post localhost.
Yeah. So here's my food. I logged it right here. So I'm actually getting that object and then I can send that along. But if I go ahead and log the error, I should be seeing that error. Where is my error? Let res. What's going on here? Console.log. I'm not expecting this to, kind of expecting this not to be here, but let's log the response. What the hell? How's that working? Oh, what is that getting back? That is doing like a get request. Magic. What?
Gave the ID 7, right?
Magic food 1222 add. Wait, how is that creating the food? Oh, okay. I know what's going on. This is not actually the thing. I'm running the wrong server. Okay. I have a different one. That was a different file. Because I've actually pushed up a working version to Heroku and I was actually running that project. So I need to go into my food demo. That's the one we've been using. That's magic. Okay. So I just switched to a different Rails project on my computer. There. That one doesn't even get them. I'm getting a cores error.
Probably don't have your backend set up to handle.
No, it's coming from this one.
Oh,
I'm surprised I'm getting a. I don't know what happened there.
I was getting something similar on my homework.
You shouldn't be on the homework. You should not be getting if you're using my and if you do, if you see that cores error, then hit me up. But
It was a different error. Like it didn't even have a number. I think it's something wrong with the URL.
yeah, if you see this access control allow origin, you should not be seeing that.
Yeah, it wasn't that one.
I shouldn't even be seeing this. Okay, let's try this again. Do this. I probably will just restart my. I think it's getting confused because I'm like switching between. S. Okay. It's working. Sweet. So I was actually running my server in a different Rails project. So cool. Now I'm back to where now I'm actually looking at, that's why I was like, how is this working? That's magic. Because I didn't have a post defined. Because this should not work. And now it's not going to. Cool. There we go. 404. Because I don't have a post request set up for API foods. And that's what I would expect because my server, I haven't set that up. So I'm kind of done with this, right? Can't really do much more. But I can try to do, I could do this in my error. I'm going to leave a note to do move up to catch or like when DB working. So I know it's going to fail because that's not defined, but I can still like maybe go in and be like, this is my foods dev. I can kind of just like go in and be like, well, can I at least add that to my UI? Let me kind of explain what I'm talking about and why this might be useful. So I know this is going to fail because this is in the wrong spot. This should be my add method. I know this is going to fail because this is not defined in my backend. But what I'm going to do anyway in my error is I'm just going to add the food that was passed to my form, by my form to my state. Set dev, set dev. What's that called? Set foods dev. Okay. So now I can get my foods. I can, test. I can add a price. I get the error, but I can still see it being added to my state, which would be nice. It's nice as like UI stuff. I can still like go work on it. I can see that I'm adding it to my state. But once again, I kind of can see this is not in my database or this doesn't have an ID, right? So actually didn't save to my database. But I can, as a front-end developer, I can be like, well, I can kind of assume it's going to eventually work. I can add it to my state and I can test it.
Is that because you didn't call a set foods?
Is that?
Back in your
I called it right here. Yeah, I called it right here.
Okay.
What I want to do is
That's in your error.
What?
That's within your error, within your catch. You want to put it up there.
Well, I know this is going to break. If I put it here. Well, first of all, let me show you what I really want to have here. I don't want to set the food. Remember, that doesn't have the ID. I want to do res.data there. But this call is going to fail right here. We're going to stop executing right here. We're not even console.log.
Because you haven't defined a post in your backend.
Because the backend doesn't have that defined. So we're never going to see that log. Yo. So I come in here, get my foods, do that. See, I get the 404. I don't see that yo. But what I can do is I can still do some testing. Well, let's just, how do I add a food anyway? Well, let's just add it. That's what I want to do. I mean, I can kind of see that that's working and I can get rid of that. What I'm showing or what I'm trying to show is like, now as a developer, I'm like, okay, cool. I think I actually have like as the front end, I think this is done. I can get rid of that. ASD, I add something, or let's get the foods. Okay, it's not adding, but I kind of tested it out. And I think once my back end's working, it's going to work. And just to kind of show you, because I do think this one does, this URL does work. Pretty sure this has the create method working. Or let's just go in and do the create method on our backend so we can see it. So our front end's done. Now I take off my front end hat. I'm no longer a React developer. Now I'm a backend developer. I don't even care about React. They could be using React. They could be using Postman. They could just be using Chrome, like whatever. I don't care. I want to create a route and have my backend handle being able to create a food. So how do I do that? I'm going to do a post request to foods. That goes to my foods controller to the create method. Cool. So then in my foods controller, I do a def create. And remember, this is just, we can kind of just take my word for this. We're going to create a sanitizer that is sanitizing parameters. So I call this food params. What this goes through, this just makes sure that my params, I'm going to make sure that it has this food key on it. Sweet, and I'm going to look at that. And then within that, oh my God, into that food key, I'm going to allow name and price.
So what is that doing? That's saying that what they can specifically add is only the name and price?
Pretty much. So this will return a object with name and price. It like sanitize it, like, yeah, it checks and only returns an object that will have name and price. So then in my create, what I can do is I can do a food equals food. So I get my food model. So hey, food model, I want to, make a food. Give it that food params, and then I try to save it to the database. And else end. I'm just going to say to do. I'm not even going to do the error handling right now.
So what you're typing right now is Ruby, even though it has like an if else, kind of like JavaScript.
Yeah, this is Ruby. So Ruby has methods. This is how I create a method in Ruby is with the def keyword. It's short for define. So I'm defining create. And then, yeah, here's an if else statement. If else.
These are functions, not methods, right?
Same thing.
Oh.
Functions and methods are synonymous. So if my food saves, I can render JSON food. Else, whatever. Let's just do an error really quick. Render JSON errors. Since we talked about errors. This is just a way I can like go in and like grab the messages. But more importantly, I do this. I give it a status of 422. So I said, if it does not save to the database, I gotta let the user know, hey, you screwed up somehow. And I'll tell them how they screwed up with this errors.full messages. So now I could go to Postman. I'm going to do a localhost API foods. I'm going to do a post request body food name text is whatever cheese. And then I can, I have it already out there, cheese. And then I can test the price. Send that request. Cool. And as far as the back end's concerned, I'm like, sweet, I'm done. I'm done with that create method. I've tested it in Postman. It works.
So now whenever you finally go on your website and try to submit it, it should get submitted to the back end under the define create that you just created.
Yeah. So yeah, now it's done on the back end. And I spent all that time, like, even though the back end wasn't working on the front end, I kind of did some little tricks. So now let's go in and be like, front end price, 1, 2, 3. Let's add it. And it's working. It's adding to my React state. It has an ID. It's saved to the database. Circle of life is complete in the create function.
So how can you look in the database again to check if it has saved?
Well, I'm getting an ID back, first of all. Or I could just say get foods. That get foods does an Axios call to my database that resets my state with the updated foods. So
now it's right there.
yeah.
Now, so if you refresh and then you do get foods, it should still be there.
Yeah. Get foods is like, it's doing a whole other Axios call and resetting my state. So get foods, clicking this button is doing that.
Well, before we hadn't hooked it to the back end, but now we have.
Yeah.
So it's there. So it's going to stay there.
Mhm. So now that is done. The create at least is done. See, there's that yo. Now that call is working.
What did you just console.log yo? Or what is that?
That was when I was doing my front end, just to show you this used to be failing. But then I went in my other project, set up that route, set up the method, had it working. So now this works in my front end.
Is there a way to show your error to work and then it to pop up that 433 or 22 or whatever the number was? Is there a way to trigger that?
Yeah, so let's do that really quick. If you want to hop off, you can. It's late. Hop off, come back at 2:15. But yeah, let me just trigger that error really quick. So one way I could do that is just in my Rails project, I go to my food model and I can just add a validation. So what I'm going to say is it validates name and, presence is, how do you spell presence? P-R-E-S-E. Presence is true. I have to spell these right because those are. So what this is saying, for this to save in a database that there has to be a name value. You have to give it to me. I could also do something like this, validates.
What is the presence doing?
It's saying and we'll see it. I'll kind of show you what it does. I'll show you another validation. I could say price. I'm going to say, I think it's numeralic. I can never say this word. Numericality. It just means, hey, is this a number? So name must be present and price must be a number. So I add
Okay,
that.
so now if you tried to, for the name, if you put numbers and then for the price, if you put letters, it's not gonna pop up and the error should pop up.
Yeah, so so there's the validations. Name must be present, price must be a number. My food controller, we try to save it to the database. If it does not save, this is what we render. We render a 422 error, and then this JSON that has errors, and then this, whatever this thing is. So let's go to Postman. I'm going to change cheese to be nothing. And I'm going to change the price to be, ASDF. And I got, this is a server error. It's not that 422 error. It's a 500 error. So that means I screwed up coding this. And I can see like, did you mean validate instead of validates? So it looks like I screwed up with that. Yeah, this should be validates. So that's a syntax error. That's why I'm getting a 500 error. Let's try that one more time. Send. I think I spelled that. Numericality. Yes, I spelled that wrong. That needs an I. So that's another 500 error because I misspelled that. Send again. Oh my God. Undefined method, local variable foods. Did you mean food? In my create. So that's in my create controller. Yes, right here, foods. That's undefined. So I tried to save to the database. It's failing. Now that was undefined. Just working through all these 500 errors, which are syntax errors mainly. Send. Okay. Another 500 error. Wrong number of arguments given 0, expected 2, line 21. What doesn't it like that? Full messages. Okay, I think that's what it is. Okay, finally, yay. Now it's a 422 error. So I had to, all of those 500 errors were me mistyping stuff.
So
Now-
last question for me. If you go onto your on your Chrome where you have your React page loaded, and now if you type in like if you type in numbers right there and then letters at the price, will it give you that error again too? Yeah.
Yeah, it gives me that 422. So it does give me the 422. It doesn't create. So this actually does trigger this catch. And yeah, I have to kind of like drill into this error.response. So it gives me back this error response. So I need to go into there. Error.response.data. There's my errors. Name can't be blank. Price is not a number. So I could go in and grab that and then like have some nice UI to be like, oh, hey, you tried to create this that didn't have a name.
Now that's Ruby who typed that name can't be blank, price is not a number, because I never seen you put that in.
Yeah, that's part of this validates is doing that for us.
Okay.
So that's part of like this function. Rails does a lot of things for you behind the scenes. So
I understand it. It's just kind of a lot of like syntax and little stuff, but like the general understanding of it, I understand what class does, I understand what pose does, I understand all of that. It's just kind of the little like how to format it is what's a little overwhelming because there's so much new syntax.
oh yeah, this is definitely like one of the hardest weeks, or like learning Rails and React. Yeah, because Rails, there's so much with Rails, and then there's so much.
I understand how you go back and forth and how you're coding both of them. It's just a little tricky, but it's not too hard to understand.
Sweet. Well, cool. I gotta hop off. I gotta go into a meeting, but yeah, I'll see y'all in an hour. So yeah.
All right,
Cool. See ya.
later.